spiritual food for thought.
Welcome back to Spiritual Food for Thought. I thank you for joining me once again. In light of the recent Supreme Court decision about Roe versus Wade, a lot of people are talking more about abortion and things in that realm. For some time, there's been a number of people in the pro-life movement who have sought to redefine, or more accurately define, what pro-choice really means. Because the choice that people are making is going to be the death of an unborn child. So there are those in the pro-life movement who are saying, well, you're not really pro-choice, you're pro-death, you're pro-murder, you're pro-sacrificing your child. Even though it's unborn, it's still your child, and you're choosing to kill it. You're choosing to murder it. So that is what choice really means, is what they're going to say. And I have no issue with that. I believe that's true. But if we flip that coin, I want to point out that to call yourself pro-life is probably not accurate for the vast majority of people who are against abortion. The vast majority of people who are against abortion are not pro-life. They're anti-death. They're anti-murder. They're anti-killing of an unborn baby. I mean, if we're going to say that the choice is the murder of a baby, and that would be more accurately defined, you're pro-murdering unborn babies, then by definition, by, give and take on that realm, you're going to have to say that you're not really pro-life, you're actually anti-murdering babies, whether they're born or not. And the reason that I bring this up is that I wish that those people who would consider themselves not their own, those people who would consider themselves to be God's people, would be more in line with what God says. And God, being the author of life, has a very special relationship with life itself. And my point is basically that if people are getting vasectomies and detaching their testicles from their bodies, or getting their tubes tied for women, where you're severing the connection between the ovary and the uterus, you're not pro-life. And you do not agree with God on life. You really don't. You can still be anti-murder. You can still be anti-killing babies in the mother's womb, but you're definitely not pro-life. And for those who claim that God is the author of life, but then have those operations done, you've got an issue there. That's like if I meet someone who makes amazing paintings and I'm like, wow, this person is gifted as an artist. They're a really incredible painter. I really like their artwork. Let's take away their paintbrush. You're saying that God's the author of life, at the same time you're removing his ability to author. And that's an issue. Why? The two main reasons that I would say why, I've already made videos on. I just thought that this was a good time to kind of point this out, because I've never pointed this out quite like this on this channel yet. But the one video talks about the body mutilation epidemic in the Christian church. And what happens is often people will show up with tattoos or piercings. They'll be mutilated in their body. And, believers these days will be like, oh, look at them. They're mutilating their bodies. What a horrible thing. Well, more often than not, those are leftovers from an old lifestyle. Very few people come to Christ or receive him as their Lord and Savior and then begin to tattoo and pierce up their body. That's not the way it happens. So that's leftovers from the previous lifestyle. But these days, the modern church often looks at the external. Okay, God looks at the heart, but they look at the external and they say, wow, what a horrible body mutilation. At the same time, they're taking thousands of dollars often and paying a doctor in secret to mutilate their reproductive organs of themselves or their wives for the sole purpose of causing God not to be able to author life. That is messed up, and that is not pro-life. Just gonna say that. Also, the other video I previously made is talking about children. Either children are a blessing or they're a curse. Either they're a reward or they're a burden. God says that they are a blessing. God says they are a reward, they are a heritage, they're a gift from God. There's something special and good. And if God desires godly offspring, he first desires offspring. If you don't have offspring, you can't have godly offspring. And the world is the one who says they are a burden and a curse. And a lot of people, subliminally, because they have in the back of their mind that their children are a burden and a curse, that comes across as an undertone in their interactions with their children because they view them as a burden and a curse, so they treat them as such, even though at the surface level it may seem, on the up and appropriate, but subliminally that message comes across, and then their children are raised where they actually become curses to their parents, to themselves, to the rest of the world, because we get to deal with them when they get older, and they're not treated or raised as blessings, where they get to be a blessing to their parents, where they get to be a blessing to themselves, where they get to be a blessing to the rest of the world. The church should not agree with the world on this one. Children are not a burden, nor are they a curse, nor are they something negative. And the modern church should not be mutilating their private parts, their reproductive organs, to prevent life. At the same time, they're saying they're pro-life. Pro comes from a root Latin word that means to be for something, to be giving it a thumbs up, to be supporting it. Well, if you're for life, then you would allow God to be the God of your bedroom too. And you would allow the author of life to choose whether or not he sees fit to author life. Think of the times in Scripture that a man and a woman are not supposed to come together. Okay? Now we see that in marriage is the proper context for that. And in the New Testament, Paul says that, don't prohibit one another, except it be for a time that you give yourselves to fasting and prayer. And when you're done, come together again. He says, take a break from the physical, from focusing on the physical, to focus on the spiritual. That's part of how fasting and prayer works, or prayer with fasting. That's how that works, part of it. And then also in the Old Testament we have, if there is a monthly cycle occurring, during that time, a man should not come unto his wife. Now there's probably certain health issues and other things and stuff in relation to that, but it's interesting to note that that is a time when conception is not possible to happen. So he says, don't enjoy this during a time when I cannot bring forth offspring from that interaction. Now, he's an awesome God, and to even create such a way for us to bring forth children into the world is awesome. He didn't have to give us any marital pleasures within the bedroom. He didn't have to do that, but he chose to. It could be when the male and the female put their fingers together and somebody smashes it with a hammer or rock, that the seed passes from the male into the female, and then they have an opportunity to conceive children. There would be a lot less unexpected pregnancies if that was the way it occurred. He could have done that, but he didn't. He gave us pleasure in it. It's interesting as well that many people will point to those who are fornicators, those who are not married, but having that type of intimate physical interaction, and they'll say, oh, they want, and I've heard this, they say, oh, they want all the blessings or all the pleasures that a marriage offers without the responsibility. Well, when you mutilate your reproductive organs to prevent the author of life from authoring life, then you want all the pleasures and blessings of a marriage union without the responsibility. I mean, let's compare apples to apples. If that's what they're doing, then you're doing the same thing. In this, many people are probably not going to agree, or they're going to have a knee-jerk resistance to this, but I'm just offering it up for contemplation as spiritual food for thought. If pro-choice, and that choice being murdering an unborn baby, is what some people are doing, then if you are pro-life in the midst of that argument, you're not really pro-life, you're anti-murdering an unborn baby, or you're pro the life of that unborn child. That's what you are. You can do that at the same time you're exercising your freedom to mutilate your reproductive organs to prevent God from authoring life, and still call yourself pro-life in the midst of that argument. But in the broader scheme of being pro-life, you are not pro-life. You're simply anti-death of unborn children. I'm going to end with Psalm 127 and point out a couple things. Memorize His Word. Meditate on His Word. Think about these things. Before you form a thought, consider what God has to say. Meditate on that, and then begin to form a thought so that you know what reality is, so that you know what the truth is, so that you know, as you are not your own, how you should properly be if you're going to be His. If you're no longer a slave to sin, you're a slave to righteousness, and you should be contrary to this world and its theologies and ideologies and what drives it. It's the world that says children are a burden. It's the world that says children are a curse. It's God who says they're a blessing. Agree with Him. Psalm 127 here says, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I'm living in a building right now. God did not build this physical building. When he says house here, he's talking about a household or a family. If you ask my children, how does God build a house? How does he build a family? Well, if he's going to build it up, what's he going to do? He's going to add members to it. He's going to add people to that house. And that's how he's going to build up the house. That's how he's going to build the family. It says, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Well, how do they labor in vain? Because oftentimes, when people try to restrict the number of children that the Lord is able to bless them with by mutilating their reproductive organs or practicing like the rhythm method or something like that, like we're least likely to conceive right now, therefore let's enjoy our marriageal physical interactions and the pleasure of that now, because then it's least likely that God's going to bless us with the children. That's also not pro-life. But it says they labor in vain that build it. And somebody may say, well, I wanted a boy and a girl. We actually had a boy first, then we had a girl, and then we, had our tubes tied or had a vasectomy, and now we don't have any more children. We got exactly what we wanted. How did we labor in vain? Well, what is the reason that people restrict themselves from being blessed with children? Often, there's some sort of financial or emotional or other, types of hardships that they're trying to avoid by restricting the number of children the Lord blesses them with. Oh, that costs so much to raise a kid, therefore, if I only have two, it'll be easier for me financially, or, I've got all these things I should do with my children, therefore if I only have a couple, it'll be easier for me to do. Well, whatever grievances, whatever hardships, whatever difficulties somebody was trying to avoid by only having one or a couple children, they can still have. They can try to avoid that, but those same burdens could still come upon them because they labor in vain unless the Lord build the house. There's people with many children who, in some cases, even have it easier than people who only have a child or two sometimes and chose to only have a child or two. I remember when we had our third, somebody commented about, wow, 3 children already? And it wasn't too long later that they said they would rather watch all of our children than one of somebody else's. That speaks volumes. That they would rather watch all of our children than one of somebody else's. Psalm 127 continues, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. Lo, children are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. The fruit of the womb is a reward from God. It is a heritage that he gives to his people. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth happy. That word happy can also be translated as blessed. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. How many arrows do I need? How many children in my quiver do I need? Well, I'll tell you what. If they are as arrows in the hand of a mighty man, if you're using arrows for war, I would want as much ammunition as I possibly could. Correct? Well, we are waging a spiritual war, and if I raise up my children properly, they can be used as ambassadors for his kingdom in this world, and possibly, potentially, probability-wise, have a much greater influence because of the number of them than a child that I had and then chose to remove my testicles from my body so that God couldn't author life again in my marriage. Again, I'm pro-life, and this is not a thought that I had. This is what he showed me. He showed me this. That this is why he created it. This is how he caused things to function. He can close up any womb. He doesn't have to open a womb. There's some people who allow God to choose the size of their family and only have one or never have any. That's fine. He is God. He can choose to do that. And if you're okay with his plan, then you'll be okay with that. Do I want more children? Well, I don't want more children any more than I want less children. I'm kind of an active participant in that. I am willing to receive what he gives me. And whatever he gives me, I'm going to strive to be a faithful steward of. I'm not going to mutilate my body or the body of my wife to prevent God from being God. To take away part of something that only he can do and say, well, you can't do that here anymore. Why? Because as for me and my house, as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. Do I have the freedom to do that? Sure. Does that make it right? No. Look what happened to Judah's son. He went about his way to try to obey God in going to take his brother's wife, but then he spilt it on the ground. Why? So that she wouldn't conceive, and people say, oh, well, he was so selfish. He didn't want to raise up an heir for his brother. Yeah, so is that more or less selfish than not wanting to raise up an heir for yourself? But happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. In the midst of this Roe versus Wade, what we're dealing with in this country these days, people talking about abortion, consider when you talk to people who say they are pro-choice, what choice they are actually supporting. What that choice actually is. And that choice is the murder of an unborn child. That's 100% accurately what it is. But also, as you talk to people who are pro-life, help them to understand that in the midst of that framework, they are pro-life. In the midst of that framework, they are pro-life by being anti the murder of an unborn child. But if we're truly God's, and if God truly is the author of life, and if he truly is the one that knits us together in our mother's womb, and if we are truly fearfully and wonderfully made, and if he truly created our bodies to function in a certain way, we should not be paying someone with a scalpel and a knife to go in there and cut pieces up so that God cannot author life. That's not a thing that a believer should be doing. It really isn't. I believe that it breaks God's heart when he sees that. And man will come up with 1,000 excuses. I get it. I understand. If you don't think I've been tempted to come up with excuses and disagree with God, I've done that for a very long time. But what must we do? We must resist the temptation. Thy will be done, not mine. I should decrease that he may increase. And that's why I choose to be pro-life. Actually, pro-life. I thank you for watching. Be blessed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.